Olá a todos, bem-vindos a mais um SBC Podcast, gravado ao vivo no 19º Congresso Brasileiro de Coluna, na cidade de Recife. Vou fazer uma pergunta para vocês hoje. Vocês já ouviram falar de classificação de Lenke? Se você é cirurgião de coluna, neurocirurgião, ortopedista, fisioterapeuta, qualquer área da medicina relacionada à cirurgia da coluna, certamente você já ouviu falar de Lenke. Hoje a gente tem o privilégio de receber aqui Dr. Lawrence Lenke, uma das pessoas mais expoentes da cirurgia da coluna, uma das personalidades mais conhecidas da cirurgia da coluna atual e que que nos honrou, que nos brindou com o privilégio de participar do nosso 19º Congresso Brasileiro de Coluna. A gente vai hoje entrevistar, talvez, um dos grandes nomes, um ícone, um mito da cirurgia da coluna. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence Lenke, for the presence. In behalf of the Brazilian Spine Society, I want to thank you very much for being here with us. It's a great honor for the society, and it's a personal honor for me.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, I'm one of the persons that admire your work for many years. So it's a big pleasure for me to be here with you.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So the reason for this interview is not only to collect scientific point of views and learn with you. We are delighted to have your talks here in the meeting.
What a phenomenal meeting also, I must say. I'm very impressed with the entire meeting.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, very successful meeting.
Yeah, you're part of the success. Of course. We can see the rooms are full packed today and yesterday
amazing
because
people,
of your talks.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. But the reason of this interview is just to understanding the man behind the surgeon, the myth.
Sure.
So you're probably one of the most recognized spine surgeons in the world right now. Everybody knows you. I did a short introduction here saying that every orthopedic surgeon, every neurosurgeon, every physical therapist related to spine knows your name, and that's something that comes with a lot of responsibility. So I want to hear from you the pathway that you cross over this 32 years of practice from residency to become this person.
Sure. So again, I was fortunate to train at Washington University in St. Louis with my first mentor and probably my biggest mentor ever, Keith Bridwell. I was his first fellow. I elected to stay at Washington University after my orthopedic residency and be his first fellow. Although honestly, that I consider myself a grandchild of Ron DeWald. So Ron DeWald, one of the founding members of the Scoliosis Research Society, trained Keith Bridwell, and Keith Bridwell trained me. And so I've always had a close relationship with Dr. DeWald, who actually I visited and spent a month on his service as a medical student in Chicago. So that my interest in actually scoliosis really predates Keith Bridwell to Ron DeWald, but there's the lineage of DeWald to Bridwell then to Lenke. I'm very proud of those two mentors to me. And honestly, when I was, and I've mentioned this to other surgeons at this meeting, when I was a fellow in the middle of my fellowship, I really was planning to go into private practice. I like deformity, and I certainly like the challenge of deformity, but I wasn't very academically minded. Honestly, I only had a couple papers I've written, and I really didn't like writing papers. I was not an English major, and I found it kind of difficult to write papers, and so I was looking in private practice, but what happened was I was fortunate enough to be recruited to stay at Washington University with Dr. Bridwell to take over the Shriners spine service at the St. Louis Shriners Hospital. So what that meant was I literally was handed a list of 105 pediatric patients who needed scoliosis or kyphosis, some type of spinal deformity surgery at the start of my attending clinic. So my first day of work, basically, I had 105 patients to take care of, and that was an unbelievable opportunity. So I was very fortunate that I was able to.
There's not one of the times in your life that you select something. It's the life selecting for
exactly,
you, right?
Because otherwise I would have went into private practice and we wouldn't be sitting here today, most likely. It's amazing how there's several junctions in my life, and this was one of them when I just seized the opportunity. I didn't know the ramifications of it at the time, but it changed my career and changed my life, honestly. So I started out mainly at the Shriners 2 days a week. Every Monday and Tuesday I did surgeries and both days, and I saw patients on Tuesday afternoon, and then I had a degenerative practice on the adult side. I just had degenerative practice. Dr. Bridwell was doing all the adults, and most countries you have to have a little bit of gray hair and experience before adults with significant deformities will come to you for surgery, which is very appropriate, because honestly, adult deformities was very challenging, especially back 32 years ago. It was very challenging.
Yeah.
But I got a head start in pediatric deformity, and I was, by 3 to 4 years in practice, I was doing 3 to 4 days a week in pediatric and then adult deformity. And so I had a really big head start versus my peers. I mean, I was keeping up with other peers, and we were discussing our careers and cases, and it was obvious that I was getting experience they weren't getting. But I was just lucky at the time that I had an opportunity to treat so many patients with deformity at a very young age. And so that was a key pivotal point. The other thing that happened very early in my career is through Dr. Bidwell and Dr. DeWald, I got invited to go to the SRS meeting as a fellow and then as an attending. And the first year I was there as a fellow, my first SRS meeting, we won the Hibbs Award for the best paper. So I was in awe. I was at this meeting with 800 people in the audience, and I was shivering giving my talk and very nervous. I'd never spoken in front of that many people before. And then we won the best paper award. And so that, again, academically really was a pivotal point to launch my academic career, because I said, wow, I don't know what I'm doing. And we were, and then again, a lot of it obviously with Dr. Bidwell, it was really his idea, but my work that got us the award. Obviously I did all the legwork, is what happens when you're a fellow. Yeah. But the combination was obviously successful, and that led really to both Bidwell and I being very successful the next 15, 20 years in St. Louis, building a very prominent clinically and academically focused deformity service. And so that was a springboard to the academic part of my career. And I really got involved in the SRS very early through not only Dr. Bidwell, but then through Jürgen Harms and Randy Betts and the Harms Study Group. And that's how basically the classification system of AIS came evolved.
That would be my next question.
Yeah, so honestly, both from a clinical perspective, I had a great start, just having a lot of patients to take care of. And honestly, since I was so new, I really kind of selected out of the 105 on the list patients who had more straightforward problems and deformities. I was a new surgeon. I wanted to basically still take baby steps and learn how to do things, and then I gradually got more interested in the more complex cases. And then academically, again, we built a very nice academic program. We started getting a database of all our patients from day one. When I started my practice, both Bidwell and I were keeping a very detailed log on all our cases. Every part of them, all the radiographic data was being put into a database, clinical data, operative data. We'd spend 15, 20 minutes after every case, which I still do today, putting in all my data all the details of the surgery. And then that really became very successful. So 10 years later, we were able to mine that data and get really good manuscripts and publications out of that data.
Interesting, because this is one of the tips that I used to give to my new fellows. Absolutely. And everybody that is starting with something, not just only spine surgery, but if you're starting a new practice anywhere, you have to collect data.
Essential.
That's something that I learned with my masters. You probably know this, and this is definitely
essential for anyone, no matter what field you are, of orthopedic surgery or neurosurgery. Keeping your own personal database. I think honestly, at least in the United States, it's going to be required very soon, because we have to show our own data and outcomes on all our patients for the value proposition of
not only because you're helping develop the science, the scientific knowledge, but also you all auto-evaluating your job. So
exactly,
self-evaluating yourself, and this is very important to take decisions.
Exactly.
It's interesting that you mentioned about your lack of interest in scientific publications at the beginning.
Yes, very true.
Right after you was part of the group that creates your classification. That is one of the most famous classification in our field right now. So how this happened? How the idea of the Lenke classification?
So the idea came actually when I was a fellow. I literally, the King classification, I think throughout the world, was the most common classification system when I was training of AIS, 5 types. You all know the type. Although honestly, and this is a true story, I kept a paper copy of that classification system in my pocket of my coat in the hospital for my entire fellowship year, because it really confused me when this was a thoracic curve classification, but a type 1 curve was a lumbar curve, major. And I said, well, why would you ever, in a thoracic curve classification, make the number 1 curve a lumbar-based curve and a thoracic minor curve? It just didn't make sense. And then, the type 2s and 3s were a bit confusing, and so and then there's no sagittal plane. So it became obvious when I was, studying for cases and doing cases with Dr. Bidwell as a fellow, that there was something was missing, It was not a great classification system for more modern day CD instrumentation and more modern day analysis of scoliosis. By the early 90s, we were certainly paying attention to the sagittal plane a lot more.
Zero sagittal plane at that time.
Exactly right. So, but the key is actually, my first experience with quote Harms Study Group was, and this is again another fortunate situation. Randy Betts Betts organized the meeting of the first meeting of the Harms study group was Randy Betts, Jürgen Harms, Harry Shufflebarger, and a guy, a surgeon named Tom Lowe, who's now deceased, but a surgeon in Denver, Colorado. They were meeting, and they invited Keith Bridwell because they wanted to start working on looking at doing AIS surgery either posteriorly, as what Harry Shufflebarger and tradition was being done, but Jürgen Harms is really promoting the anterior approach. In Europe, it's becoming very popular to do all scoliosis surgery, single curves at least, anteriorly. So Randy Betts arranged this meeting, invited Keith Bridwell, but Keith Bridwell couldn't come, so basically he sent me instead. He asked, "Do you want to come to this, go to this meeting and just take notes and give the notes back to me?" And I think it was first year attending. I was in my first year attending. The other surgeons didn't know me. I knew who they were because they were my famous mentors. They were very famous surgeons, but I was a nobody. So I go to this meeting. My main responsibility was to work the projector slide to advance the slides. So I advanced the slides and take notes. But what I realized is that the first thing that these four surgeons would do is they would try and agree on what King classification it was, and they couldn't agree. Every case, 80-90% of cases, they couldn't agree on it. It's a type 2. No, it's a type 1. No, it's type 3. And so I could tell that the reliability of the system was not good. So the first thing I did when I went back is we arranged the reliability of the King system amongst our surgeons at our center and other places. And we published this in JBJS, very poor reliability. And another group had done the same study, back-to-back articles, and I think it was 1998, poor reliability of the King system. So that opened up the door for a new system. Yeah. And so bottom line, right at that point, I started working on how could we better improve upon the King system, obviously. And I wanted to have it three-dimensional. I wanted to have a rotational plane. Obviously, we needed to add the sagittal plane. That was pretty obvious. I wanted to add the axial plane, but in doing that, it was very difficult at that point in time. The reliability would go down, and it was still very difficult back in the 90s just to add three-dimensional criteria to the data, to the classification system. But fortunately, working through the Harms study group, we came up with this idea of the modifiers and the curve types. And again, I have to give credit to Jürgen Harms and Randy Betts and people that kind of helped guide me through this. But I also mentioned this when I was fortunate enough to give the Harrington lecture at the SRS meeting in 2022. Instead of Jürgen Harms, who couldn't make it for personal reasons. But honestly, to this day, he determined that this was going to be the Lenke system and not the Harms system, and it was his decision. And I really will always be indebted to him because it was your idea. It was my idea to redo the classification, and I had the basic concepts involved. Obviously, they really helped fine tune it and improve upon it. But at the end of the day, we were at a dinner one night deciding and talking about this, and Jürgen Harms basically said, "No, Lenke's going to be the name associated with this, not Harms." And so
another proof that the universe can work for you.
Again, to this day, that's another reason why we're talking today. I mean, there's little things in life that make such a huge difference, and it's become really the most published and researched paper ever, and cited paper. That's the term. It's the most cited deformity paper in the history of the world. So it's obviously launched my career academically as well.
Yeah, that's amazing story.
True story, absolutely true.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this.
Right.
And how you start your relationship with the SRS.
Right.
You mentioned big names from since the foundation of Society. You probably work among them.
Yeah, so
you half brother of Chris DeWalt.
Chris DeWalt, exactly right. Half brother of Chris DeWalt. So yeah, basically through mentorship. I mean, I started going to the meetings and then getting introduced to more people. I went to every meeting. I mean, I haven't missed an SRS meeting since 1991.
Wow.
And I've only missed one IMAS meeting since 1995 when it started as well. So again, very fortunate. I started going to the meetings and meeting people, and I just got involved. I mean, I was able to get on some committees, and you work hard on the committees. People recognize that. You become chair of the committee, and then I was able to take over IMAS from Randy Betts. So I was chairman of IMAS, kind of during the glory years of IMAS, when IMAS really took off, going from 200 people attending to 800 in the 4 years I was chair of it. So I was just again very fortunate. Everything kind of was said right, and because of that success, I was given credit for that, even though it wasn't all me. Honestly, it was just in the right place at the right time. IMAS was ready to take off. Industry was ready to support it, and there was a time for increased training. Things were changing from hooks to screws, and there was a lot of things changing in the spine world, at least in North America. So IMAS was poised to take off for SRS, and it did. Mm-hmm. So, and that honestly, my success in IMAS kind of got me onto the board of directors and then onto the presidential line. That's kind of really what launched my SRS leadership career, was being so successful with IMAS. And running a big meeting like that is, you get to know a lot of people, and you interact with a lot of people and staff, and that's really important.
And you have this skill because you have a very good interaction with other surgeons. I can see.
Hopefully, I mean, try and do that, right?
You have with
exactly. I'm kind of a people person, so I enjoy that, and I don't have to really struggle. I mean, I really enjoy talking to people and helping people, and also knowing that people can help me. I mean, I don't know everything, so I'm a good listener, I think, and that's part of being a successful person and surgeon is listening and adapting over time. So
I'm gonna move on to a more personal question.
Sure.
So is you working very hard, showing difficult cases.
Right.
You have a big series of cases. So you have done surgery in many people during your career.
Thousands, yes.
You attending meetings, participating in scientific societies.
Right.
So how you balance time?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Even family time.
Yeah, right. So as a quick point, I'm thinking about this a lot now because on Wednesday, May 11th, I think the day is, I am the guest speaker at the combined POSNA meeting in DC. So Dan Zaccato, a very close colleague of mine, great surgeon, great friend, is the president of POSNA. So he asked me to be his presidential speaker only under the circumstance that I would not talk about a spine topic. And so the topic I'm talking about in the title of my talk that I'm already starting to put together is managing the imbalance. Myself certainly included, and I would say most spine surgeons in the world who are really busy don't lead a balanced life. There's no way to balance the clinical aspects of taking care of your patients, doing good surgery, all the other things that come with that. Working with your staff and administrative. Almost everyone has administrative responsibilities, let alone if you do academic work as well. Working with industry. I mean, there's lots of options to be really busy in spine surgery, almost overwhelmingly busy, and so we're not balanced. We just, first of all, the first thing to admit, it's kind of honestly like Alcoholics Anonymous. You have to recognize that we have a problem. I mean, I recognized a long time ago that I was not leading a balanced life. So I had to discuss that with my wife and my 3 children, young children at the time, obviously, and so the way I managed it initially was, number one, being open. And my wife and I talked about this. Well, luckily, my wife was in healthcare as well. She was a nurse and a hospital administrator, so she understood a bit. Well, it was easier, but again, when push comes to shove, and you have 3 kids at home, and I'm never there on the weekends and never there during the week, or late, they come home late at night. I mean, there's only a certain amount of understanding that will get you through that, right? And so
that's part of our life.
Everyone, exactly. That's my point. Everyone has an issue, but the few things I did, at least to help me. Number one is that my wife and I recognized that we were on a sustainable pathway from a family perspective. So I had to do something to show that I support her and to support my family. So what I did is that she really wanted to do marital counseling, and I was against it. I don't need help. We can talk. My wife's name's Beth and I. We can talk. We can work through this ourselves. We don't need anyone to help us. I was wrong. So we started marital counseling every Tuesday. So basically every Tuesday night for about 15 straight years, I was incognito. I was never on a call. I was never away. Tuesday was a sacred family day. That's between 6 and 7. We met with our marital counselor, and then after that, we went home and took our children to dinner. So Tuesday night, I dedicated every Tuesday. I may not be home Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but every Tuesday I dedicated that to family, and it showed a commitment. Again, it was a tiny commitment, and I certainly wished I would have done more, but it was a commitment, I think, that made her realize that that she and our kids were really important to me still, even though I was leading an imbalanced life as a deformity surgeon. So that was really successful, and I'm proud of it. And I really recommend it. I tell our fellows that you need to get help, and because these people are professionals. I mean, they know how to manage things. They know how to give an objective perspective. After hearing both sides of how you both come together as parents, as spouses, and just lead up and manage the imbalance, basically.
Yeah.
So that was very, very, I think, very helpful. And honestly, that's the reason I think we're going to celebrate our 35th wedding anniversary in May, and that's probably the reason why we're still together. Is that I made the decision, kind of reluctantly, to start having marital therapy, and it really was a wonderful experience, honestly.
Tricky question.
Yes.
Any of your children follow?
No. My oldest child is a mental health therapist, so a social worker, but she does mental health therapy. Not a physician, and my other 2 are not in the medical field. But honestly, and they tell me they just saw me work too hard. So that was, and I realized that that's really kind of sad. So I didn't. My point, I didn't manage this perfectly. So please, I'm not the one to give advice. I managed your life perfectly, and that's why my title talk is managing the imbalance. I was imbalanced, and I tried to do the best I could. But the thing that's interesting is that when I'm asked this question. I mean, would I do anything drastically differently? I really wouldn't. I mean, I love what I do. I think I've tried to not only, obviously take care of patients myself, but, there is a better goal and better good in helping others through education. Being here at this meeting, I'm very proud that I can educate surgeons with my experience and research. I mean, I feel that that's almost an obligation that I've been given, right?
That would be my comment. So sometimes in life, you feel you put yourself in a situation that you feel that you have the obligation. It's a duty, so you have to do that.
So I don't think I would change things drastically. I certainly would cut back a little bit of my travel. Honestly, the travel was, especially when my children were younger, was very hard on my wife.
Yeah, but you have to know, and they probably know this. They of course they know this. You changed the history of spine surgery, and you changed the history of many patients.
Well, hopefully, yeah. I mean, that's how I justify it internally. I mean, I think hopefully my children realize that. But again, that's the truth. I really wouldn't change a lot, and so and I have to live with that. I had to own it, and I still own it. I would do it somewhat differently, but I'm still very proud of it. And luckily, fortunately, again, I'm very lucky that my wife stayed with me, my family stayed with me, and at the end of the day, I think they realize how much they mean to me. But again, I kind of had a bigger calling to help kind of lead our profession as best I could. I was just very fortunate to lead our profession in a way that.
And we are very fortunate to have somebody like you, because you really changed the way we see spine I
appreciate that. Again, I'm a kind of a humble guy, and it's hard for me to understand or believe that. But I mean, I think I've just been very lucky. Again, I'm not the most talented surgeon, but one thing that I tell my patients this, that come in from all over the country and world for very complex problems. I'm not the best surgeon, but I do have the most experience. I mean, and that's true. I mean, I have probably done more deformity surgery, at least in the United States, than any other surgeon in the last 32 years. And experience means a lot, right? And surgery is not a spectator sport, right? You have to be doing it. And I've just done a lot of surgery. I had 5 OR days a week for about 15 years of my career. So
we were talking yesterday, just 2 clinics a month.
Exactly. So very, again, very fortunate practice that I tried to not only help myself, my own patients, but again help others help their patients. And then my reach is exponential, and that's something I think I'm very proud of. So
if you have to do maybe 1 or 2 advices for new surgeons that just arriving here, look at you and see how astronomical was your career. You inspired a lot of people. You create like a legion of surgeons. So if you have to do 1 or 2 advices directly to one of the surgeons, what would be this advice?
First thing is that you don't learn everything you need to learn during your residency and fellowship. Your first 5-10 years of practice, you learn a lot. And the key is that there's so many other smart people around the world. Go visit them. So I was very fortunate. I visited over 30 centers, about 60 surgeons my first 2 years in practice. I asked that when I stayed at Washington University, because I was, I had done all my training there. So I wanted to go see other things in other places, and they allowed me to do that. And it was incredibly beneficial to my career. So, take the time, because in the beginning of your practice, you're still malleable. You can still kind of change the way you treat patients, think about things, but you have enough experience that you don't have to even, scrub in. You can just watch surgeons, how they interact with patients in the office, what their indications are, how they and the scrub nurse interact in surgery.
Managing OR.
Everything. There's so many things I picked up by that. I just ended up spending 6 months of my first 2 years in practice just visiting surgeons. Jurgen Harms, Bob Winter, Jean Duplessis, all surgeons you all recognize. And I learned a ton from that. So number 1, just go see other things early in your career. Number 2 is that get involved in the societies. Honestly, I was very fortunate, involved in the SRS very soon. This society is amazing. I mean, there's over 1,300 surgeons at this meeting, and the quality of the papers and research, and even just the clinical case discussions are outstanding. And there's so much to learn from, benefit from that. So get involved in the societies, because again, what you realize is that you and your peers, then when you get to know in these societies, have the same struggles and the same issues. No one has it figured out yet. So you realize, number 1, you're not alone when you're struggling trying to figure out how the best way to treat patients, and also how to manage life. You're not alone, and I think you get guidance seen really good friendships from that, and I think that's really important to get involved in societies, especially like this societies at a very young age.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, it's true.
Those are
Absolutely.
wonderful tips. And I completely agree with you. I think visiting surgeons, I was very fortunate in my life too, to see different surgeons doing,
Right.
different things.
No one does exactly the same thing the same way, right? I mean, it's amazing. I mean, subtle
you
things.
collect your experience to create your way to do things.
Exactly. That's what I say. I'm not exactly like any surgeon I've ever seen. I have a lot of Keith Bridwell in me because he trained me as my first mentor, but I've got some Jurgen Harms in me. I've got some Bob Winter. I've got some David Bradford, John DeBasset. I mean, all that, both philosophy and technically, is built into who I am today. And that's, and again, so although I'm Lenke, but honestly, I'm really bits and pieces of so many other surgeons that really deserve credit for that, because I wouldn't be who I am today without kind of having them be a part of me in my surgical complexity, and my surgical completeness, maybe is a word.
Yeah, life opportunities.
Exactly, right.
Hard work.
Right, exactly. Taking advantage of all that. So very fortunate.
Yeah, also. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So we run into the end of this interview. I want to say big thank you
you're welcome.
all your work. I know you have a very tight schedule, and you make some time to be here with us.
It's been an honor.
Even traveling a lot and having to balance the
unbalanced life, right?
Yeah,
I'm still working on it. I haven't solved it yet, but I'm definitely better at it now than I was 10 years, 15 years ago. I certainly you learn over time. So
and you learn how to say no.
Yeah, exactly. That is true. Yeah, I've had to learn how to do that. Exactly right.
Yeah. So I have to say thank you very much for being here. On behalf of Brazilian Spine Society, we very honored to have you here. It's a big pleasure for us. It's not our first visit to Brazil, and I hope this will not be the last.
Not if I could help it. So
we will keep inviting you.
That sounds great. I appreciate that.
Anytime you have a schedule, empty spot in your schedule, it will be a pleasure to have you here. Know that we really appreciate all the hard work that you have done for the evolution of spine surgery.
I appreciate that.
And we're really fortunate to have you here. Thank you very much
for
being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. Great.